Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Ned Quartermain had never imagined that he would one day find himself racing against time to stop a wedding, yet as Thanksgiving morning broke over Port Charles, the weight of what he had uncovered settled on his chest like a stone he could no longer carry. Willow Tate, sweet-hearted, endlessly forgiving Willow, had agreed to remarry Drew Kane after their disastrous first attempt had collapsed under the brutal truth of his affair with Nina Reeves. Even now, Ned remembered the look on Willow's face when Curtis delivered the news, shattered, betrayed, quietly devastated. She had walked out into the cold that day, not only leaving behind a wedding, but a lifetime of trust she thought she had been building. Yet here she was again, ready to step into the same storm. And Ned, who had spent weeks quietly circling around Drew's increasingly erratic business decisions and unsettling connections, knew she was walking into something far worse than heartbreak this time. The Quartermain estate buzzed with holiday chatter, but Ned's focus remained locked on the folder of evidence tucked under his arm, documents that linked Drew to financial crimes, fraudulent cover-ups, backdoor dealings that not only endangered the company but threatened to pull several innocent people down with him. He had hesitated for days, torn between loyalty, fear of blowing up yet another family scandal, and the knowledge that Willow, who had already endured so much, deserved the truth before she exchanged vows with a man whose secrets grew darker by the week. And he wasn't the only one questioning whether this wedding should happen. Port Charles had a way of stirring up trouble when hearts, lies, and long-buried guilt converged, and Thanksgiving seemed determined to become a holiday no one would forget. Nina Reeves, desperate to cling to the fragile bond she had formed with her daughter, paced her living room replaying Liesl Albrecht's visit over and over in her mind. Liesl had tried, with surprising gentleness, to show Willow another angle, one in which Nina wasn't the villain, but a mother terrified of losing her daughter to a man she believed would hurt her again. Nina had been cautious in the weeks leading up to the wedding, telling herself she would not interfere, that pushing Willow would only widen the rift between them. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of the betrayal, the lies, the way Drew had manipulated situations to make himself look like a steadfast partner while concealing truths that could ruin lives. She knew Willow wanted stability, peace, a future where her children wouldn't see their mother hurt. But Nina also knew Drew Kane better than Willow did, knew the temper, the impulsiveness, the ability to justify morally gray choices if he believed the end served the people he loved. Would he make good on his promises this time? Could someone who had already fractured Willow's trust be worthy of another chance, when the stakes, her family, her emotional well-being, her future, were so high? And as Nina stared at her reflection, she realized with a sinking feeling that she couldn't remain silent. Not today. Across town, Michael Corinthos paced his kitchen, hands clenched, unable to shake the nagging sense that he was losing something he once took for granted. He had spent so long distancing himself from Willow, convincing himself the marriage had eroded beyond repair. They had drifted into a polite co-parenting rhythm, a careful dance that avoided the intimacy, the conversations, the warmth they had once shared. But the thought of Willow marrying Drew gnawed at him unexpectedly, pulling at emotions he believed were buried. He told himself his concern was about the children, about stability, about not wanting a man like Drew, who seemed incapable of maintaining honest relationships, becoming a fixed presence in their lives. But the truth was messier. There were moments when he caught himself remembering the early days of their marriage, the laughter, the comfort, the partnership, and wondering if he had given up too soon. Could they have rebuilt something if he had tried harder? Now, with hours left before Willow said her vows, Michael questioned whether he should go to her, tell her he had been wrong, tell her she deserved someone who saw her fully, valued her fully, and would never jeopardize her trust. But was he too late? And would Willow, who had endured abandonment and betrayal from nearly everyone she loved, ever believe he genuinely wanted her back? Meanwhile, Harrison Chase had spent sleepless nights chasing leads that twisted into deeper shadows. His investigation into Drew's shooting had begun as a duty, one more case, one more attempt to uphold justice. But it had quickly become personal when the evidence began pointing toward a cover-up. For Willow's sake, he wanted the truth, wanted her free from suspicion, free from fear that her fiancé's unresolved crimes might spill into her life. Chase had always been the steady one, the protector, the moral anchor, even when his own life spun dangerously off balance. With Brooklyn at home, now his wife and hoping to start a family, he knew he had no business getting tangled in someone else's drama. Yet every instinct screamed that if someone didn't stop this wedding, Willow might pay the price for trusting the wrong man. Chase knew what it meant to love her deeply, to see her worth, to ache for her happiness. He also knew that loyalty to Brooklyn demanded he stay out of this, that barging in to stop another man's wedding, especially Willow's, was not only reckless but potentially disastrous. Still, as he stared at the final pieces of evidence he had collected, his gut twisted. How could he stay silent when Willow was walking directly into danger? The church buzzed with quiet anticipation as guests filtered in, unaware of the emotional firestorm barreling their way. Willow stood in her dressing room, staring at her reflection, trying to convince herself that this time would be different. Drew had apologized, had insisted he had changed, had promised to protect her and their future. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe she was not repeating a mistake, that she was choosing hope and not denial. Yet a small voice inside her whispered doubts she was too scared to acknowledge. She had survived betrayal before, could she survive another? And then the door burst open. Not Nina. Not Michael. Not Chase. But Ned. His face was ashen, eyes filled with urgency and a sorrow that told Willow everything. This wasn't about cold feet or family drama. This was about truth, devastating, life-altering truth. He stepped forward, speaking her name gently, almost apologetically, before laying the folder onto the table between them. Willow's hands trembled as she opened it, scanning documents that made her heart pound, each page revealing pieces of Drew she never knew, fraud, manipulation, corporate crimes that threatened families, livelihoods, reputations. The room spun as Ned explained how long he had tried to confirm the information, how deeply Drew's secrets ran, how much worse things could get for her and her children if she tied herself to him legally today. Willow felt the floor disappear beneath her. This wasn't just a broken promise. This was betrayal on a level she could barely comprehend. As tears filled her eyes, Ned placed a steady hand on her shoulder. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply told her the truth, with compassion, with regret, with the hope that she still had time to save herself. Outside, as murmurs spread through the church, 3 other people approached the door, Nina, Michael, and Chase, each arriving with their own reasons, their own confessions, their own fear that they might be too late. But Willow had already made her choice before they even reached her. She would not walk down that aisle again. And Drew Kane, who had believed this wedding would erase the cracks in their relationship, found himself standing alone at the altar as the truth unraveled, and the people he thought he controlled slipped out of his grasp one by one. The church bells had only just finished echoing through the crisp Thanksgiving air when murmurs began rippling through the crowd. Guests craned their necks, sensing something was wrong. Drew stood at the altar, straightening his cuffs again and again, an unconscious tic he couldn't seem to stop, while his jaw clenched in growing irritation. It wasn't like Willow to be late. She was punctual, organized, thoughtful to a fault. If she was delayed, something had happened. But Drew's mind stubbornly refused to consider anything beyond harmless inconveniences. Maybe her hair appointment had run long. Maybe she needed a moment alone. Maybe Nina had shown up and caused a problem. He scoffed at that thought. If Nina had tried to start trouble today, it would be just like her, to make Willow's wedding all about her. He took a deep breath, tightening his forced smile, pretending that everything was under control. But nothing was under control. Behind the closed doors of the bridal room, Willow's world tilted further off its axis with every passing second. She tried to breathe, the way her meditation instructor had once taught her, slow inhale, slower exhale, but each breath trembled as though her lungs were failing her. Ned waited quietly, pacing in small circles, occasionally glancing toward the door as though expecting Drew to burst through it at any moment. Willow pressed her hands against the table to steady herself, her reflection in the mirror a pale ghost of the bride she had been minutes ago. She read the documents again, hoping she had misinterpreted them, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. But the truth stayed the same. Drew hadn't just lied. He had been living a double life, hiding decisions that could cost people their freedom, their financial stability, and their reputations. "How long have you known?" Willow whispered, her voice barely audible. Ned flinched, guilt shadowing his eyes. "Long enough to be ashamed I didn't come sooner." "But why me? Why today?" Her words were breathless, confused, broken. "I didn't want to hurt you," Ned confessed. "And I wanted to be absolutely certain. Accusing someone of crimes like these without proof could destroy lives." He paused, swallowing thickly. "But once I had the evidence, it became clear that the person whose life would be destroyed wasn't Drew, it was you." Willow closed her eyes, feeling the sting of betrayal spread through her chest like wildfire. All her life she had fought for scraps of stability. She had survived an abusive childhood, a cruel cult, the loss of her adoptive mother, the threat of cancer. She had finally allowed herself to believe she deserved happiness, safety, love that wasn't conditional. Had she mistaken desperation for devotion? Had she convinced herself Drew was her safe harbor because she was too afraid to stand alone? A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Ned stiffened. "Do you want me to answer that?" Willow wiped her eyes. "Yes." When he opened the door, Nina stood in the hallway, her eyes red from crying, her breaths uneven. She looked as though she had rehearsed a dozen speeches on the drive over, all of which disintegrated when she saw Ned's expression. "Ned?" she asked, instantly wary. "What's going on? Is Willow okay?" He stepped aside reluctantly. Nina froze at the sight of her daughter, pale, shaken, clutching a stack of papers as though they were burning her hands. The air shifted, heavy with dread. "Willow," Nina whispered, voice cracking. "Sweetheart, what happened?" Willow did not look up. She could barely speak. "You were right." Nina blinked in confusion. "About what?" "About Drew." That was all Nina needed to hear. Her heart dropped violently. She turned to Ned, panic rising in her chest. "What did he do? Tell me what's going on." Ned held up his hands. "It's complicated. And this is Willow's decision." "No," Nina snapped, stepping forward with fierce maternal urgency. "She's my daughter. She is about to bind her life to a man who clearly doesn't deserve her, so tell me the truth." Willow finally looked up, her eyes brimming with betrayal. "Drew's crimes go deeper than any of us thought. He's been lying for months. Maybe longer. And he was ready to let me marry him today without saying a single word." Nina's breath hitched. She walked to Willow slowly, as though approaching a wounded animal. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I never wanted this for you." Willow shook her head. "No. I didn't want to believe you. I didn't want to hear what you or anyone else had to say. I thought I was choosing love. But all I did was ignore every warning sign in front of me." Ned stepped forward gently. "You can still walk away, Willow. You haven't lost anything yet, not today." But walking away felt like drowning. It felt like yet another failure in a long line of failures she had tried desperately to rise above. And as Willow grappled with her pain, the door opened again, this time revealing Michael. His chest rose and fell quickly as though he had sprinted from the parking lot. He saw Nina first, then Ned, then finally Willow, her wedding dress wrinkled from trembling hands, her eyes swollen, her expression shattered. "Willow," he breathed, stepping inside. "Tell me I'm not too late." She looked at him with confusion and exhaustion. "Too late for what?" Michael stopped, choking on the words. "I shouldn't have let you get this far. I should have told you sooner." "Told me what?" Willow asked, her voice frayed. Michael stepped closer, his voice low, trembling. "That I still love you." Nina gasped softly, and Ned looked down to give them privacy, but Willow felt the world spin again. She blinked slowly, trying to process everything hitting her at once, Drew's betrayal, Nina's fears, Ned's warnings, and now Michael's confession? "This isn't fair," she whispered. "You can't say that now." "I know," Michael said quickly. I know it looks selfish. I know it's awful timing. Believe me, I never planned to say it. But when I heard you were marrying Drew again, I panicked. Because the thought of losing you forever, officially, permanently, made me realize I'd been lying to myself. Willow shook her head. No. You distanced yourself. You shut me out. You told me you were done. I thought I was, Michael admitted, pain etched across his features. I thought it was too broken to fix. But seeing you walk into Drew's arms again, I couldn't breathe. And then I found out some things about Drew that worried me. But I wasn't sure if it was my place to say anything. Nina folded her arms, staring at him. So you waited until today? Michael glared back. I didn't come here to fight with you. Willow felt tears spill down her cheeks. Everyone, please stop. She sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed. There was only so much chaos one heart could hold. Ned, realizing the situation was spiraling, gently said, Willow, you don't have to make any decisions right now. You're not walking down that aisle, and that's enough for the moment. Another knock sounded. Nina frowned. Oh, for God's sake, who else is here? Ned opened the door. Chase stood on the threshold. His tie was crooked, his expression grim, and his breath visible in the cold hallway air. The moment he saw Willow, broken, surrounded, drowning, his face twisted with concern. I shouldn't be here, he said immediately, looking at Ned, then Nina, then Michael, but I didn't have a choice. Willow's voice was barely a whisper. Chase, you too? He nodded. I found evidence in the shooting case. Evidence that puts Drew in a very different light. Evidence that jeopardizes you. Willow closed her eyes, her stomach churning with a fresh wave of nausea. Not again, she groaned. Please, I can't take any more. Chase stepped forward slowly. I know you're overwhelmed. And I'm sorry. But if I didn't come today, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Michael looked between them, suspicion rising. What kind of evidence? Chase hesitated. Evidence that Drew wasn't just a victim in his own shooting, he may have played a role in the setup. Nina gasped, horrified. Michael swore under his breath. Ned exhaled sharply, confirming Chase's information aligned with what he had discovered. Willow felt as though the ground had opened beneath her feet. He staged his own shooting? Not exactly, Chase clarified. But he may have provoked the situation, manipulated it, or used it to his advantage afterward. Enough inconsistencies have surfaced that the case is officially reopening. And if you married him today, if you became legally tied to him, you could get pulled into the fallout. Willow covered her mouth, trembling violently. Chase's eyes softened. I'm not here to make choices for you. I'm just here to tell you the truth. Because you deserve honesty. Something Drew hasn't given you. The silence that followed was suffocating. Willow finally stood, her legs unsteady but her resolve strengthening by the second. She looked at all four of them, Nina, Michael, Ned, Chase, each one having shown up with different motives but the same message. Don't marry Drew. She took a shaky breath. I need a moment alone. They nodded and filed out, closing the door gently behind them. Willow stared at her reflection, her wedding dress, her trembling hands, her tear-stained face, and whispered to herself. How many times do I have to break before I learn? She didn't know what her future held. She didn't know who she loved, who she trusted, who she would be without Drew. But she knew one thing with complete certainty. She would not walk down that aisle today. Outside the bridal room, the tension thickened as the guests sensed something was terribly wrong. The whispers grew louder, restless, curious, hungry for answers. Drew finally stepped away from the altar, unable to stand still any longer. His footsteps echoed through the hallway as he approached the closed door, his gut twisting with a fear he didn't want to name. When he reached for the handle, Ned stepped directly into his path, blocking him with a calmness that only made Drew's temper flare. Ned, Drew hissed, move. I can't let you go in there, Ned said firmly. Not right now. What the hell does that mean? Drew snapped, his voice echoing. It means Willow knows the truth. Drew froze, his face draining of color. Behind Ned, Michael, Nina, and Chase stood in a tense half-circle, silent, united, forming a barrier he couldn't break through. Panic flickered in Drew's eyes as he realized the one thing he feared most had happened. Inside, Willow stood alone, breathing slowly, regaining her strength. She didn't need to open the door to know Drew was out there demanding answers.